Welcome to Love and Life Elevated. I'm Dr. James.
Hi, I'm Dr. Deborah.
We are so excited. This topic is a charged topic these days, probably more than any time in my lifetime. We're going to talk about boundaries, and we have gathered some phenomenal information that you're going to go, oh my goodness. And just a little sneak preview. One of the things we're going to talk about today is the power of saying no, and which is a hard one. Oh my gosh, I have yes-itis more than most people do. I tend to overcommit. I tend to say yes more than no. And when you shared some of the stuff that you were sharing with me today, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn more about no.
I also have yes-itis. I don't know if you remember this, but boundaries was one of the very first things we covered when we decided to start doing this once a week together. And I love that we are coming back to it because we did dive into the research before, but now we have some really compelling stuff, so much that I have 2 pages of notes. So sorry if it's overwhelming, not sorry.
Sorry, not sorry.
I just really want to hit it home that this really matters. I think boundaries become the topic du jour. There's a lot of people talking about boundaries. And when we talked about boundaries before, we were talking about between your love relationships, your friendships, and at work. And we're going to talk about that all again, but we're going to attach science to it and why it is so important now more than ever to honor boundaries and what it does for ourselves and our self-confidence and our mental health and our clarity.
So if you are in a place where you're saying, my goodness, there's so much happening in the world right now, there's so much happening in my inner life and what's happening around my life, this subject is literally life-giving. And the more that we look at how it is that the power of honoring what you believe helps to create an inner citadel, which is basically a stoic way of looking at protecting the vessel, protecting the mind, and more importantly than anything, I think it's protecting our hearts. As you navigate the world right now, and how do you create a world in which you can kind of live inside out with thoughtfulness and meaning and purpose and boundaries versus having the outside in, which I think the inputs of life right now have been absolutely extraordinary and hard and difficult to try to navigate through. I think you're going to find today's experience together super empowering. And I love to say really simple, because this is the kind of stuff that's very, very simple when you have a plan, you have a purpose around it, and you really, really practice, because all of this is truly a practice towards mastery of honoring self. And I really believe honoring the people around you, so you create a healthy way in which the energy exchange can be sustainable, honest, and authentic.
100%. And when we think of boundaries, when I think of boundaries, there are several kinds. For some reason, I keep thinking about when you're skiing and you have the bound. You don't want to go out of bounds, out of boundary. Well, that's like a physical boundary. But when I brought it down to the real simple definition of what are boundaries, they're expressions of self-respect and emotional health. I was like, boom. Oh, that's amazing. And I know what that feels like when I'm not speaking my truth or setting that boundary. I feel like I'm disrespecting myself. I know that my emotional health is suffering because I'm not being true to who I am, who I want to be, and I'm not saying no when I know something doesn't feel right. It's really interesting.
It really is. So I'd like to lay the foundation. This is something we've talked about many times in different ways with all the different shows that we've done. I think discipline is a place to begin. It's a practice of structural discipline. I think it's reactive discipline. And I really like to say growth discipline. Those 3 disciplines help to kind of set the stage. So how boundaries can kind of really be implemented and practiced in a way that we really kind of design our day in such a way this becomes almost like a dharma. And dharma is a beautiful Sanskrit word that simply means a way of living. It's authenticity and action. And I love to say it's a gritty way of giving yourself permission to lead your life under the influence of what your heart knows to be true for you.
I also love this description that setting boundaries or saying no, it's more than just setting a boundary. It's a neurological and psychological act of self-protection. self-preservation.
Ooh, man, let that land. Saying no
Self-preservation.
and self-preservation. And I learned something recently about the fact that just the act of no, based on honoring our authenticity, living in a place of real self-preservation and that honoring, here's what happens. The no in relationship to that self-preservation and authenticity quiets the amygdala. Literally quiets the part of our brain that's associated with fear, that's associated with anxiety, that's associated with unsteadiness in our life. And I think a lot of us in a lot of this community, we've shared ideas around, man, the unsteadiness of life right now is real. And if we tend to be moving in that place where we're saying yes and overcommitting and feeling like, oh my gosh, I got to be on for everything, that really gets the amygdala overzealous, going into overdrive. That increases all the mental challenges and emotional instability. But no, literally shuts it down, quiets the amygdala, opens up the part of our limbic system, which is the emotional center of authenticity and grace and gratitude and joy. And I think that real beautiful way of stability and preservation you spoke to, honey, so powerful.
And the other thing is that science shows that when we have trouble saying no, that's linked to higher levels of chronic stress. And we know that is a big problem with so many aspects of physical health and emotional health. You have inflammation, you have mood disorders, a lot of mental health disruption. And so who knew that saying no and setting a boundary actually has that profound of an effect?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I can look at personally right now, a boundary that I've been extremely diligent with, and that is social media in relationship to politics. I don't have the stomach, I don't have the heart, I don't have the emotional stability to bring that in the way that most social media platforms bring that in. So I just literally shut it down. It's a hard no. And it's not because I don't care. I care deeply. And my caring deeply sometimes moves me into places where I can lose myself. So I pick the places that I can read, I can learn, I can grow, and I can evolve, but I don't have things blasting at me that really triggers me and puts me in a place where I become defensive. My amygdala clicks into overdrive. This has been one of my greatest boundaries. And I feel like something that we've been doing, honey, is that we are really, really good about making sure if we're going to talk about things that are charged and triggering for us, we really make sure that both of us are ready for it. We don't just at each other. We make sure, hey, I read something. I'm not sure if you want to hear about this. It's really, really hard, but I think it's something we need to know about. Introduce it to your partner, to your friends that way. So we don't just text them something or just bring it to them without any forewarning. That is a part of honoring and creating a healthy boundary and respect for the people that you love.
Yes. And I love what you said that around social media, because here again, the science supports, I'm going to read this, is that saying no enhances brain resilience and long-term happiness. And I know that is what you're doing. You are preserving your happiness. And the studies, the neuroplasticity studies, and I want you to address neuroplasticity, suggests that regularly setting boundaries strengthens neural pathways associated with confidence and resilience.
Boy, oh boy. So what that basically is telling us, this is a practice. And the more that you practice it, the stronger it becomes. I think a lot of people go, oh my gosh, resisting politics on social media, can't do it. Or, oh my goodness, I tend to say yes to everything because I want to feel included and I don't want to miss out. Well, if you know that you're overextending or you're putting stuff in your field of reference that you know is not healthy for you, the practice of no and the practice of boundaries literally reinforces over and over again. And eventually, this becomes your default. This becomes easy. It literally becomes a thing you just go, it's an automatic for me. My automatic pilot is boundaries. My automatic pilot is no, reserving and preserving my mental, emotional well-being. Think about that as a superpower right now, that this is this growth opportunity that we can literally integrate every single day. And, you know, as we're kind of bringing ourselves to know, and oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that to someone I always say yes to. It's a celebration. And it's also something you can say, I know I always tend to do this, but it's not working for me anymore. I'm finding myself burning out. I'm finding myself not as grateful for myself when I do those things. So please help me to honor this new boundary. I'm going to say no. And then you're also going to know, how do people respond? Are these your people? are these, your heart-centered people. Because if people still think, well, you've always said yes to me and I want you to keep on saying yes, even though I know it's not good for you, that's a telltale sign that we might want to kind of, how should we say, do a little re-exam on our circle of friends.
Yikes, I've got a lot of work to do, is what I'm thinking. Okay, so circling back again to the science, because I took notes, so I want to make sure that I let you know all the things I found out. And this is so good because it ties again into what you were saying about your boundary around social media. So think about why are we so drawn back to social media again and again throughout the day? And it's that dopamine hit. It's that like that we get. Well, guess what? Protecting personal time and energy through saying no fosters dopamine release.
How about that?
Fostering long-term happiness and emotional stability.
Which seems almost counterintuitive based on how we've been programmed to think that dopamine, due to the social media experience or getting likes on social media, but what that's
like
been
an exhale.
right?
Though I can picture circumstances in recent days where sometimes you and I, we really have to process the no, or oh my goodness, this expectation. You say no, and it's like whoosh, this big exhale, and you almost feel the dopamine release way more than getting a like on social media.
Oh my gosh, right. And I think the distinction is that social media likes and that type of algorithm induced dopamine is dirty dopamine. That's what they call it. Dirty dopamine. Clean dopamine is authenticity. It's the no. It's coming from our heart and listening to what is our primal truth and authentic way of living. That's clean dopamine. And clean dopamine has such a motivating factor and such a momentum creator to helping us to curate and move forward in our life. And I really want you all to really let this land for you. I think overcommitment has become this, I don't know if it's just an art form that is literally destroying our quality of life. Overcommitting, being busy is almost like when you say, if you're not busy, then something's wrong. Being busy becomes a thing that we look at as we revere busyness. Well, that's not normal to be busy all the time. It's not normal to be saying yes all the time. And I think there's so much pressure in society today to continually look like you have it going on. There's so many things you say yes to because you continually want to be pleasing. And didn't you have a piece that you shared with me sometime this past week about the pleasing instinct and what that can actually do for us, that desire to please others?
Well, it's exhausting, number one. And number two, while you were talking, sorry, this is kind of going off topic, but I was wondering, and you may or may not have the answer to this right now, but when you look at something as obscure as, say, birth order, because I know you and I, we're different birth orders, and, families of basically 3 with siblings, and you're a middle child kid, and I would, how do I say this? I would say you may be a people pleaser. Okay, I'm just gonna say it like that. You, in our 32 plus years together, have a hard time saying no. That's changing, especially in the past few years when this research, like you've gotten way better than me in saying no. But how much of this people pleasing comes from stuff, kid stuff? Well,
let's get right into the idea of trauma response. If you have any childhood trauma or there's just trauma in your world, the research tells us more and more wanting to be liked and wanting to please and have affinity towards yes, even if it actually gets in the way of your authenticity, even if it dissolves your boundaries and your self-care, it feels like it's self-preservation to say yes. It feels like, oh my goodness, that's my lifeline to be included. And I'm going to give myself away. That is a trauma response. And that rewiring we talked about a moment ago, honey, is really this whole idea of neuroplasticity helps to regulate the nervous system. So the more we normalize no, the more we normalize healthy boundaries, the more we create and curate communities where we can authentically show up and be vulnerable in a very healthy way, that becomes an epigenetic transformation. You're engineering a gene expression that says, I'm healing this. I'm growing from this. I'm fortifying this authentic, beautiful vulnerability that I can celebrate in the power of no.
And with that, with the brain and the neuroplasticity, what you were just talking about is saying no. This has been huge for me. it protects us against decision fatigue. You know, when the brain becomes so overwhelmed with so many choices. And so when there's so many decisions without clear boundaries, it actually depletes our cognitive energy and our brain health. And I can just picture, okay, this is such a simple example, and it really, I'm stretching the boundaries here. But when you go to a nice restaurant, okay, how about Cheesecake Factory? I don't know that I'm putting that in the nice restaurant category. At one point,
I think you're trying to make sure everyone knows.
What I'm gonna
when
say.
You have kids, it's an amazing place.
Well, and if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about with the menu, right? It's 17 pages.
It's a volume.
Or you go to a restaurant and you have so many choices, it's overwhelming. Did I make the right decision? And then you pick something and then you have remorse. Oh, did I pick the right thing? And that does like really funky things to our mental health. And then you finish dinner and you get to dessert. And again, it's this huge list. And what's the healthy boundary? No, thank you. I don't need dessert. But you have so many choices that you can't even think clearly. And then you may by default get dessert when you're already full. So it's really funny how you can take this idea of setting healthy boundaries for yourself and you can plug it into every aspect of your life, not just your romantic relationships, but your relationships at work, your friendships, your behavior when you're out and about in public. Like, where do you set your boundaries? Just know going in what you want to stand for.
Well, I think there's been two examples in my life that I really, really love to share around this idea of decision fatigue. Steve Jobs is known for the fact that
Good one.
One of the biggest things he said is that in the morning, the best thing that you can do is not have to decide what you're going to wear. He said so many people will go into their closet and, I'm in this dress or that shirt or those pairs of pants. When you just say it's jeans and a black shirt, that's all he ever wore because he wanted to save his cognitive, creative genius for what really mattered, not what he was going to wear and trying to figure out his closet routine. He was in there for a minute and popped out with the same thing every single day.
Think of how much time that's
Oh my gosh. Well, and then
brain space.
Right. And then you think about how often do you create a goal, get up in the morning and exercise. And then you wake up, I'm not sure if I'm going to exercise. I don't know if I'm going to go outside and get a little pineal third eye experience.
I'm not sure if I'm going to have protein for breakfast.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm going to do all these things that I know make me more awesome, more beautiful, more empowered, more confident. And then you go, oh my gosh, these are 100% non-negotiables. So no decision fatigue. I wake up, I go outside. I wake up and I have a clean, awesome breakfast. I wake up and I don't go online. I wake up and I take time to do a plank. Whatever it is that you can curate as a disciplined decision that's a 100% yes for you in terms of your self-care, that there's no debating whether or not you're going to do what you know you said you want to do and follow through. Life changing, brain changing, physiologic changing, neurochemical changing, everything.
That's so good. Okay, can I share with you? I wrote down 5 things.
Okay, cool. Is this going to bring us home?
Yeah, it's going to bring us home.
Okay.
And this is why no is a complete sentence.
Awesome, let's go.
Okay, ready?
Yep.
Number 1, no eliminates justification fatigue. So over-explaining triggers guilt and makes room for negotiation.
All right, we can just leave it there. I'm just like, oh my God, having to justify.
Yeah, and then if you leave any wiggle room, then all of a sudden you're into these unwanted commitments.
Why do I want to eat at 5 o'clock? So I can be in bed at 8. I don't want to have to justify that.
Okay, number 2, it sets clear and firm boundaries. When you leave no room for debate, people learn to respect your limits.
Awesome.
If you get in a habit, people aren't going to be like, what? James always says yes. What do you mean you're saying no? Is it they take it personally. It's not personal. You're setting a boundary. Okay, number 3, it respects your own needs. You don't owe anyone an explanation for prioritizing your mental health. And what James just talked about, saves time and energy. The more you justify, the more resistance you invite. So a simple no is direct and decisive.
Boom. So As we move into the 20 minutes of our experience together, what's moving for you?
Yeah, what are you going to do to preserve your boundary? Like, can you practice saying, no, I can't, or simply, no, that doesn't work for me. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or don't even apologize. Why apologize? You're honoring yourself. It's assertive. It's respectful. It's non-negotiable.
And, bringing it back to something we began this experience together today with you, think about what it is that you are looking at in your life right now. Where do you find yourself finding the boundaries are shaky or even non-existent? And then think about the practice. It's really interesting, right? This growth mindset that has been talked about for decades as the power to mental health, the physical well-being, to success personally and professionally, having a growth mindset, being a student. Let's be a student of boundaries. Let's be a student of no. Let's be a student of neuroplasticity and the growth that can be happening through healthy boundaries. This is a beautiful time to really curate a new practice that really sets you up for the kind of life that preserves your peace, your purpose, the way in which you want to show up every single day. And I love this idea of confidence coming from, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is how I show up for myself, and this is how I bring people into my life who love this about me, and I give this to them as well. That is a beautiful way to decorate your life.
And a beautiful way to close for today. So thank you for, again, listening to us just go in and on with our processes and hopefully share something valuable that you can learn, and that we would love to hear from you so that we can also learn from you, share with the community, and what are the hard boundaries you're setting, where are you having challenges, and let's work on this together.
You're awesome, sweetheart. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining. Have an awesome week. We'll see you next Wednesday. Peace and love for now. Bye.
Bye.